All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our October Teach Educational Rounds. Here with us, we have Dr. Michael Chaiton, who will be presenting on Bridging the Gaps, Navigating Cannabis and Nicotine Use in 2SLGBTQ+ communities. And so we'll start off today with our CAMH land acknowledgement. CAMH is situated on lands that have been occupied by First Nations for millennia. Lands rich in civilizations with knowledge of medicine, architecture, technology, and extensive trade routes throughout the Americas. In 1860, the site of CAMH appeared in the Colonial Records Office of the British Crown as the council grounds of the Mississaugas of the New Credit, as they were known at the time. And today, Toronto is covered by the Toronto Purchase Treaty Number 13 of 1805 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Toronto is now home to a vast diversity of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis who enrich this city. CAMH is committed to reconciliation. We will honor the land through programs and places that reflect and respect its heritage. We will embrace the healing traditions of the ancestors and weave them into our caring practices. We will create new relationships and partnerships with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis, and share the land and protect it for future generations. So now I invite everyone to identify where you're joining us from today. I'll put a link in the chat that you can use to find out if you don't know. You're also welcome to introduce yourself and share something that you're currently doing to learn or improve your commitment to reconciliation. So I just put the link in the chat there. And in the meantime, I'll just continue on with my own personal acknowledgement. My name is Rachel. I am a second-generation Canadian located on the lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit, which is covered by Toronto Purchase Treaty Number 13. And I will continue to listen and learn about the stories and cultures of various Indigenous communities and ensure that their voices are heard. So everyone's welcome to continue and please introduce yourselves. I'm just going to keep going with some more slides, but we'd love to hear where you're joining us from today or anything. And this is a reminder that if you are interested in receiving a letter of completion for this Teach Educational Rounds, to make sure that you first registered for this webinar and completed the full pre-learning assessment. Also, that just make sure that you sign into this webinar using your first and last name, because that's how we identify you. And also to complete the evaluation and post-learning assessment, both of which will be emailed to you at the end of the webinar. And so a bit more about our presenter today. Dr. Michael Chaiton is a senior scientist at CAMH's Institute for Mental Health Policy Research, director of research at the Ontario Tobacco Research Unit, and associate professor affiliated with the Dalla Lana School of Public Health and the Institute of Medical Sciences at U of T. He has a PhD in epidemiology from the University of Toronto and is a co-director of the Collaborative Specialization on Addiction Studies. His work has been funded by CIHR, NIH, FDA, PHAC, Health Canada, and the Ontario Ministry of Health. He received an Early Career Research Award and was recognized as having a top impact paper from the Canadian Cancer Society. His work includes understanding the impact of policy on population-level influences of mental health and substance use, and the development of comorbidities, particularly among youth and young adults. His work uses longitudinal cohort studies to evaluate changes in behaviors over time and using machine learning to identify predictors of change. Welcome, Dr. Chaiton. And I'll give everyone just a moment to read through his disclosures. And this is just a note that all eligible Teach Educational Rounds presenters are offered an honorarium. That being said, acceptance of this honorarium does not impact presentation content. And the following content of Teach Educational Rounds are centered on evidence-based guidelines from the following sources. And I'll give everyone a moment if they want to read through. And these materials, as well as any verbal presentation or discussion, represent only general principles, and they do not remove the need for clinical assessment or treatment plans by healthcare professionals. So with that, I'll pass it on to you, Dr. King. You should be able to take control of the slides now in the top right corner. Perfect. Let me know if you're having any trouble with it. You're muted, by the way. Oh, under the mute button under the slides, do you have it for you? Let me see if I can okay, I'm gonna send a request to unmute you.
Hi, thank you. Sorry about that.
No worries.
We glad that minor technical thing was sorted.
Easy fix.
My name is Michael Chaiton. I'm really happy to be here today. I'll wanted to start off with following up on the Indigenous land acknowledgement, and just to identify that when we're talking about nicotine and tobacco use in this, we were really talking about colonial tobacco use. We often say it's a commercial tobacco use, but I think it's more accurate to say colonial, that the type of tobacco and the way the tobacco industry has actually, adopted the traditional forms that were present in the Americas for thousands of years, and really exploited that product, even changing the plant. So even the plant that used to be used widely through the Americas is not used anymore, and it's not present in that colonial tobacco. So just wanted to make that acknowledgement. My presentation today is about bridging the gaps and navigating cannabis and tobacco use in 2SLGBTQ plus communities. So the learning objectives here are to identify the rates of use of cannabis and nicotine products in 2SLGBTQ plus communities, explain some of the determinants of cannabis and nicotine use, and contrast the potential interventions and that are tailored for 2SLGBTQ communities. So the 2S LGBTQ community includes those identifying as two-spirit, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or trans queer, or another related or adjacent identity. About 1 million Canadians, or about 4% of the overall population, identifies as 2S LGBTQ plus, although I think that statistic does not identify the full spectrum of potential sexual and gender minorities. That 2S LGBTQ plus people experience cis and heteronormative stigma, prejudice, and discrimination due to being at odds with socially constructed notions of gender identity and sexual orientation. And that ideals can create hostile social environments and worsening their mental health, both for substance use and across a whole range of issues, but including nicotine and cannabis use, such as cigarette smoking, and who use substance use in a variety of different ways for a variety of different reasons, both individual and associated with their community. And that's what we're here to talk about today. I have been involved in a number of projects relating to substance use and queer and trans communities, from working with a group called All Together Now, which was a smoking cessation program funded by the Ontario Ministry of Health in conjunction with Rainbow Health, to working with Bruce Baskerville at the University of Waterloo at the time, to create and adapt smoking cessation programs for LGBT LGBTQ plus populations. We've moved that into a number of different other projects, including most recently and currently the Expand project. And a lot of the information we'll take from this presentation is from that project, which is in now, I think it might be the 5th or 6th year, but is starting to come to a close. And in that project, we did a number of different things, and starting with sort of understanding the determinants of smoking and nicotine use in 2S LGBTQ populations, and trying to adapt and tailor interventions for different populations. And so this header, for instance, comes directly from the website, and asking the basic question: do queer and trans young adults and adults smoke more than same-age straight and cisgender individuals? And the answer, unsurprisingly, is yes. Although that the prevalence has actually improved, and rates improved among from according to the types of measures that we have. This data comes from the Canadian Community Health Survey, from surveys conducted in 2016, and the most recent data that we have from 2023. And we can see in both years that prevalence of smoking for bisexual individuals identifying as bisexual or lesbian and gay is significantly higher than the overall prevalence of smoking in Canada. We can also see that all of these populations, the prevalence of smoking has declined significantly, and in fact has declined even faster among bisexual, gay, and lesbian communities than it has in the overall population. Similarly, we see elevated rates of use of cannabis in LGBTQ plus populations. This is the Canadian Cannabis Survey, which looks at past 12-month cannabis use. And here we see a similar pattern that compared to heterosexual cannabis use at 25%, we see rates of past 12 months use among bisexual at 61%, and lesbian and gay at 39%. So significantly higher within these populations. More concerning, though, is actually that the beyond sort of simple rates of use is problematic use or use that may be associated with sort of addiction and health issues is more prevalent among these populations. That although only 9% of the population of the survey identified as being a sexual and gender minority, 20% of those who reported frequent use were part of these populations. The final category for prevalence is among e-cigarettes. And here we see very different rates of use depending on when and where the population the populations were surveyed. This is partly because e-cigarettes are relatively novel, and we often see very different associations for substances that are new, that we tend to see a diffusion of use through a population. We saw this with cigarettes, for instance, where the initial populations who used cigarettes back when you started to become popular back in the 1920s and 30s tended to be sort of wealthier individuals. The classic doctor surveys reflected the high prevalence of use among sort of educated professionals, and that diffused down where we see the kind of disparity of use and health inequalities that we see today. We expect that among L2S LGBTQ communities that this diffusion will occur as well. That we when we for vaping, and we see this because in our surveys we see that there is relationship between the success in stopping the ability to be able to stop use when you're looking to do so among sexual and gender minorities is associated with a lower chance of success in vaping cessation. This study from a cohort that we have that looks at vaping dependence, it showed by my student Anashua Kundu and as part of her PhD thesis, it shows that quite significantly there is a lower likelihood of success among people who identify as 2SLGBTQ plus compared to heterosexual populations or individuals. More so, and it's I think impossible to read here. And this is a SHAP plot, which is also basically uninterpretable for those who've not deep into machine learning. But what it's showing is actually the intersectionality of this relationship as well. That the relationship between quitting smoking and or quitting vaping in this case, and being a queer or trans individual is actually moderated by both race and gender as well. That there are and we see this in other studies. A study that we did in California, for instance, showed the same thing, that being a visible minority and and being a sexual gender minority had created some opposite valences in interactions and complex interactions that are associated with intersectionality as a concept and are also important to consider when thinking about different populations. The relationship between sexual and gender minority status and substance use is not just related to cannabis and nicotine use. We looked at, for instance, the association of the use of psychedelics, ketamine and MDMA in this population. And what we found is very high rates of psychedelics use. So 18% of participants in our cohort surveys had used psychedelics in the past year, which is very significantly higher than the rates of use in the overall population. And when we consider both, including ketamine and MDMA, those rates go even higher. We found that cannabis and cocaine use were the predictors most strongly associated with the psychedelics drugs, but cannabis, but not cocaine use, was the one most associated with psychedelic use in particular. So these drugs like psilocybin and LSD are now beginning to have a popular conception of them being associated with improvements or being used for mental health and to improve mental health. And these results are sort of indicative of a general interest in of both the use of substances for the potential of trying to cope with or to treat mental health conditions, as well as being able to generally the higher rates of use associated with being a sexual and gender minority individual. So the next basic question is, why do queer and trans young adults and adults smoke and vape more, both cannabis and nicotine? And I think there are many different answers to this. And I think it's both, to start off, important that for any individual, the reasons for using a particular substance are varied and individual. But we can make some generalizations that don't necessarily reflect the full range of experiences. But what some of the things that come out strongly are indicative of these quotes from some of our focus groups. That, one individual says, I think it probably has a lot to do with stress and mental illness and the feelings of needing to conform and be part of the group. And that's why I feel like most members of the 2S LGBTQ plus community end up being social smokers. Or another individual said, I find that, in my circle of friends, I think substance use is very normalized, especially with my queer friends. I don't know why. And um, this is a video. Can we play? Are you able to do that? I can't. Sorry, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. I can share it. One sec.
Okay. So this video is from one of our participants who agreed to share his story and talking a little bit about sort of the reasons for use of nicotine products.
My name is Max and I use he, him pronouns. I had just come out maybe at 14, and then 15 I had started smoking because I feel like the stressors, being in high school is already a stressor, let alone if you're a queer individual. So I started picking up smoking around 15 years old, and I've been smoking ever since. Like, I feel like I picked it up due to the mental health things that came with obviously being a little different. Anxiety, it helps obviously calm anxiety in a quick moment. I would like to stop smoking. It's just been a difficult thing every time. Like, even if I stop for a little bit, I'll go back to it after. I've tried the patches, I've tried the gum, but nothing's been too successful. I haven't really stuck with any one thing. I like to lean into like things I'm into. So like I play guitar, I'll exercise because exercise helps with those kinds of things as well. But mainly like arts, like I go into the arts and I'll do stuff to like get my mind off things because that's, I would say, pretty similar to smoking in terms of the way that it would help me. I feel like ever since I came out, the main people that I tend to navigate towards are queer and trans individuals. Up until recently, actually, I worked at a queer bar, the only queer bar in Hamilton. And like I gained a very decent sense of community, like a nice group. There's a lot of like community in terms of queer people in Hamilton. So it's really nice. I found a good, strong community around myself. Every single queer and trans space I've been in, the people are always so kind, so open, so welcoming. Like it's a different kind of feeling. You kind of just feel a sense of like community and family no matter what. Like that's the best part about being in queer spaces.
I think you'll just need to take control of the slide.
So Max's story there, I mean, he talked about a number of different things that we'll come back to in this presentation, but he talked about stress and the use of a substance associated with stress. And there is a sort of a theory that relates generally this idea of minorities using and or being vulnerable to a number of different behaviors because of the position as a minority and the stresses associated with that. So we see both internal and external internal and external effects of being under that kind of systematized stressors. So internal from internalized homophobia, internal conflicts due to exposure to external events, as well as external factors such as interpersonal victimization, structural discrimination, homophobia, transphobia, etc. And so the minority stress theory it suggests that these group-specific stressors are connected to poor outcomes in marginalized populations, not specific to 2SLGBTQ plus populations, but generally being a minority can be a real source of group-specific stress. And so therefore, the use of different substances in this case that is are can be higher, for specific reasons associated with being part of that minority. We have are testing, we've done both tests of the minority stress theory, both for cannabis use and for tobacco, and the results are pretty similar. We looked at this paper is looking at the effect of minority stress on cannabis use. And here we set up a structural equation model which used a number of different elements from the minority stress framework to specifically test whether or not that this was actually happening within the population, whether you see that sort of the internalized homophobia, for instance, or whether or not it's related, sort of community connectedness and so far. And we did, in fact, were able to show that minority stress theorem is active within Canadian LGBTQ youth and young adults, and both for cannabis use and for nicotine use. Some of the things that and so that minority stress, accounted for a significant portion of the variance, and so explained the reasons why that sexual orientation was associated with increased rates of cannabis use or increased rates of tobacco use, and depending on the study, and sort of more heavier use as well. The other thing to note, though, is that the 2S population is a diverse and heterogeneous genius. And now you see significant differences within the 2S plus populations. And in particular, you may have noticed that where we were talking about prevalence, we saw higher levels of prevalence of both cannabis use and nicotine use among by people who identify as bisexual. And that was true in our study too. And even the relationship within minority stress and cannabis use, you saw different relationships between different sort of subpopulations within the sexual gender minority study that we did, where those who were 2S, 2S, bisexual, queer, and other and identified in other ways were more likely to consume cannabis than lesbian or gay individuals. So which is actually a confirmatory, in some sense, of the minority stress hypothesis that those people who have identities and who are of minorities that isn't even a minority within the queer and trans communities have even more significant stressors, which is more likely to lead to substance use. The other thing to note with the minority stress theory is that it is not just a negative implication. Max's story talked about the community that he had been able to find after he came out. And that identification with community is a source of important social support. And in fact, being able to be connected to the community can have significant positive impacts on mental health and substance use. Being able, having those resources to create social skills, to access services, and, generally those ideas of family support and self-acceptance that can be part of a positive identity. It can also be associated with negative effects of the community connectedness, when that community may have higher rates of substance use. So being connected to a community gives you positive aspects because it gives you the sort of social support, which allows you to cope with many different things. But if that community is sort of again, high levels of substance use, you may also identify it and use those substances to fit in. So the question then, sort of beyond the sort of the stressor theory, why specifically do we see these kind of like high rates of use among the queer and trans community? And what we do see is high levels of social acceptability of smoking and vaping in the 2SLGBTQ plus population. So among people who currently smoke, both over 50% think that smoking and vaping in our survey is socially acceptable for young adults to do, and even among those who don't currently smoke, we see significantly higher rates of acceptability than we would in sort of other population surveys. So overall, we see sort of this high community acceptability of smoking and vaping, higher, of course, for of acceptability of vaping status. And one of the reasons for that acceptability is, in fact, coordinated campaigns by the tobacco industry to promote nicotine products among LGBTQ populations. So these activities have been going on since at least the mid-90s, and sort of continue today in different ways, particularly through the social media and the use of influencers. But sort of our understanding of some of these programs that came out through documents released through the Master Settlement Agreement when the states sued the tobacco industries, and they had to make public some of their private documents. And one of the things that became public was this project that was done in the US. It was called Project Scum, or that it was a campaign that was targeting urban use. And this was part of a number of different companies had specific programs that were identifying, and targeting lesbian gay populations and communities that where there were high levels of rates of use or high levels of lesbian gay individuals, in order to specifically track, including specific marketing efforts, as you can see from this this one document. We see this even in particular substances. This is a relatively recent ad. It's a little bit older now, looking at smokeless tobacco from Camel in the States, which introduced a line specifically for pride events of nicotine. And, and there were certainly elements that were identifying tracking and targeting gay and lesbian adult smokers, particularly for the use of menthol and other brands that were thought to appeal to these populations. These efforts are less well known today, but they do continue, certainly through that we can see the effects, again, primarily on social media, where there are very clear elements of tobacco industries targeting different population groups. And that brings it to the next
I can share that.
Okay, video. And this video talks a little bit about some of the sort of other elements associated with smoking and vaping and nicotine use in queer and trans communities.
My name is Kat. I use they, them, she, her pronouns. I started vaping, honestly, while I was in treatment for an eating disorder. And I think my roommate had a vape. She She let me try it, and the like rush of dopamine and the head rush was something I hadn't felt in a long time. Also just the relaxation of it. And so pretty quickly I got my own. I find when I meet new people, I have to, I guess, break it to them somehow that I vape, because, like, ironically enough, out of all my identities, the only one that I have shame attached to is vaping. I think I worry about being judged, and being judged in my own community. We've made so much progress, I think, with having conversations about mental health and, you know, things that are difficult to talk about but necessary. And I think if we could kind of do the same thing but with smoking and vaping.
So the relationship between smoking and nicotine use and substance use in general, and mental health is a complex one, and there are all sorts of factors that are related. But I mean, the very clearly what people do identify is people are in, you know, across different populations, including 2SLGBTQ ones, that you know, they're using substances in order to try and cope with mental health issues or with stressors. And we see this also emerge as a result of, you know, of other trauma that might be experienced. So this is data from our cohort study, and looking at the relationship between adverse childhood experience. So this is having essentially traumatic experiences as a child, and smoking or vaping. And what we see here is that there's a significant dose response relationship between having these childhood experiences and smoking or vaping as an adult. And this relationship, again, is sort of extends beyond 2SLGBTQ populations, but is very excuse me, very clearly seen here, that having more of these traumatic experience is related to using substances as an adult, and that is and the use of the substances in a way is maybe an indicator of sort of underlying potential issues. So given that, the question is then, how do we address smoking, vaping, and cannabis use in 2SLGBTQ communities? And one of the answers is community-specific interventions. So as we've discussed, there are specific and community-specific reasons that drive a substance use into SLGBT communities. This may be that are, you know, that this is not necessarily the case across all sort of demographic subgroups, but there are real reasons why use of these of cannabis and nicotine is higher than in the overall populations. And if we don't specifically address that, we're not getting at sort of the true causal factors. So there's a need to address these drivers, the stress, trauma, and the social connection that people are seeking through the use of these substances. There is also an additional need for safe spaces unimpeded by systematic barriers. In one of our studies, we looked at the ability for 2SLGBTQ youth and young adults to access care and some of those barriers. There is the youth highlighted a need for safe spaces, which are not just with people who are trained and are in fact affirming. And I think that the important thing to note for what a safe space means and what people were looking for out of these spaces is in fact the ability to be able to enter and not have to talk about being 2SLGBTQ. And so people talked about having to, when you're dealing with therapists or dealing with group sessions, people being interested or having to explain about their identity or it's either sexual orientation or gender identity, and it's like, but as Kat said, they were comfortable with those, that's not the issue that brought them into treatment or help or looking to seek. They just wanted a space where that is no longer an issue and they can deal with the sort of the substance use or mental health issue that they were coming in to find. So the Expand project was developed in order to try and adapt and tailor smoking cessation programs specifically for 2SLGBTQ populations. And so this project took out a number of different focuses, trying to identify sort of the history of the tobacco industry, understand the reasons why queer and trans youth smoke more and use substances more than straight and cisgender individuals, and in a way that was like trying to be able to talk create a conversation within the community rather than sort of provide rather than lecture or rather than lecture. I've now lost the ability to move the slides. So some of the things that that the participants told us they were looking for in intervention studies varied significantly, and certainly, again, there's need for comprehensive programming. But what came out most strongly was this sense of seeking generalized mental health services. That there's a tremendous need and underfunding for mental health services and stress management strategies in general. And so as part of the Expand project, are also linking to mental health professionals to try and build in smoking cessation programs as part of mental health services to be able to, again, increase the accessibility of access to these services, which are so desperately needed. We can see the top three here are all related to either accessing mental health services or talking to a healthcare professional trained in being able to trained in awareness of LGBTQ plus issues. The program also included a number of other components, including specifically access to nicotine replacement therapy. And this was an element that even, pride events and quick contests we run that people were searching for, that those elements of clinical cessation and pharmacology that, may not be accessible for those who have less resources, but are also sort of a way of increasing interest in quitting smoking in generally. Our evaluations of these services that really appreciated both the access to the smoking cessation care, but even more so the access to tailored mental health component services, and being able to combine both the mental health component with smoking cessation was a way of directly impacting positively both their experiences and the success of 2SLGBTQ in smoking cessation. So in conclusion, that 2SLGBTQ plus individuals there are specific reasons why these communities have higher rates of smoking and nicotine use. And when we are thinking about interventions and addressing addressing cannabis and nicotine use, we need to develop interventions that specifically target those reasons and those drivers. Promoting, for instance, trauma-informed and culturally safe care, developing training and professional standards, and in particular, participants in our studies noted that it's not enough just to have training, but we also need to make sure that those professionals are accountable. That even if someone is trained, it's not necessarily mean that all care is appropriate. And having ways of providing that accountability within care and ensuring that services are safe across the board is important. Scaling up peer-led and harm reduction models is also a piece that is important, and understanding protective factors and resilience. As we mentioned before, there are some incredible strengths that come from being part of a community, including the 2SLGBT community. And Max's story, so it identified the strengths associated with finding people who are supportive, and that we need to identify those protective factors and build on the strength-based approaches to developing resilience in 2SLGBT communities. So thank you, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Chaiton. Yes, this is the time. Anyone, you're welcome to ask any questions. Thank you for such an insightful and engaging webinar. I know while maybe people are thinking of questions, there was someone who had asked if the studies mentioned were publicly available.
They should be. I mean, certainly there's a variety of different publications. I think you can find some on the Expand Project website directly. And some of them were mentioned. The ones that came up in the presentation, a couple of them were identified. I don't know if we used to have a good bibliography of sort of current studies. I don't think we have that right now, but I can certainly help with any specific topics. There are, there's sort of two other groups, I think, working or doing sort of excellent work in this area. And I mean, a number of different people, actually, but I just wanted to highlight a couple. One is Andy Tan in the US. He works on a project called the Pride Study. And that includes, it's a pretty comprehensive program, but it includes really excellent work on smoking cessation, and other substance use into SLGBTQ populations. And his group has put out a whole host of really important resources and studies that are, I think, are probably the place where I'd point people. There's also a new study that is emerging. It's been funded by Health Canada out of British Columbia, or will be the CRBC, it's a peer support quick program for 2SLGBTQ individuals, and that's another group. I think their resources will be coming online soon, and I think will be a really excellent place to start looking.
I think someone also they're representing them and they posted the website in the chat, which is great. I can also maybe include the links to those resources in post-webinar emails in case anyone is interested in looking into them, but that's exciting.
Oh, that's a really good timing. Yes.
Yeah, perfect timing. It launches today. So thank you. And there was also a question wondering if anything will be filling the void since Expand is nearing its end. I understand Smoke Break is in a pilot and 18 plus, therefore not young adult specific. It's
a really good question. I mean, I think we're talking about ways of being able to maintain maintain the expand project in different ways. I think that my understanding, I don't of smoke break will be that it's meant to become larger, I think it's certainly a place to look. That we've been working. The other pieces have been working with a gal, which is an organization for queer and trans individuals. I mean, it's mostly focused on sort of rights rather than sort of health promotion, but they've been interested in the project. They've been involved on Expand, and I think they're looking for ways of being able to kind of maintain some of those resources.
Rob Schwartz actually just said too, as you said, EGAL is on board to sustain Expand after funding ends, which is great. And Madeline said that you had mentioned a study about quitting vaping led by a PhD student. Is this one available as well?
This particular study is not yet. Hopefully, will be soon. Or within a short academic timescale, which is probably maybe measured in which is not short for the rest of us. But we can. There are a number of different studies that we have done with different cohorts that look at sort of quitting vaping, including Anna Shua led a recent systematic review on the predictors of vaping cessation, and which is out now and is available, and I think highlights some of the kind of the key factors. For the we've done a number of pieces on sort of machine learning predictors of vaping use, and vaping cessation, and I think that's where we always try to highlight some of the elements of intersectionality and look at the effects of sort of complex relationships with demographics on vaping use.
Perfect. I just want to see if anyone has any more questions. We also, we share Dr. Kane's email. Oh, someone else has one. Someone wanted to know if there's any studies among sexual and/or gender minority youth under 18.
Yes, I mean, certainly some of our studies include youth as well, so those under 18. I mean, the short answer is yes. And that the vaping, I think, is there's a really changing landscape, and we see different factors depending on where and when. The Compass study, I think, which is a school-based study out of Canada, there is a paper looking at the relationship in that population. There's certainly a lot of work with youth, and where we see a consistent, sort of the same sort of relationships that we see in adults. There may be sort of some differences with sort of more older or elderly individuals, but that I think is maybe where more research is needed.
Thank you. And then any more questions before we move on? Okay, well, again, we have Dr. Chain's email on the screen if you have any questions. You're also welcome to reach out to us at teach@camh.ca, and we can definitely share all these resources and websites and post-webinar emails so people can look into them. It sounds like there's a lot of work being done right now, so exciting times. But I'll just keep moving forward with some post-webinar emails to end this off. So just a general reminder, if you would like to receive a letter of completion for the Teach educational rounds, to complete the evaluation and post-learning assessment, and both of those will be emailed to you by tomorrow. We'll also include a link to the recording for this webinar in case anyone wants to watch it again. And we have Teach Educational Rounds next month with Dr. Hassan Mir, and that will be on cardiovascular disease, and registration will be opening for that soon. And it will take place on November 4th. So you'll get an email from our listserv, our mailing list, with details on registration. And just a reminder that we do have an archive list for past Teach Educational Rounds, or if you would like to view this one again, and that can be found on our website. And that's all for now. Thank you, Dr. Chaiton. Thank you everyone for coming, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of their day.